Egypt. Pharaohs. The Nile. And people on camels by the pyramids of Giza at sunset. In 2011, the world became more familiar with Egypt, but in a different light. For more than 30 years, Hosni Mubarak ruled Egypt with an iron fist. Hosni Mubarak was the third Egyptian president who came from a military background after Anwar el-Sadat and Gamal Abdel Nasser. After the assassination of Anwar el-Sadat, emergency martial law was put in place by his second-in-command, Hosni Mubarak. It was never lifted. People were afraid to talk about politics. The famous saying was, "The walls have ears." We've all heard the news reports about the revolution that happened in Egypt and how after 3 weeks of peaceful protest in Tahrir Square, it succeeded in removing Hosni Mubarak from power after more than 30 years.
Egyptian life under Mubarak regime. What a life. For 30 years we've been living under the emergency law. My whole life was under the emergency law. So basically that was not a life. Air was like, we were imprisoned in this country. This was like a big jail.
First 10 years of Mubarak regime was in a sense acceptable to us, as so we used to live with Sadat and Abdel Nasser, and it was acceptable. Not fair, but acceptable. Last 10 years were really terrible. We are losing everything. We are losing all our rights. The whole country was deteriorating, was going down. Corruption was everywhere. No one really worked for the benefit of the country. Just some people working for their own benefit, their own interest. On 80 million other people, other interests. And they had no limits, and they didn't hear. They didn't recognize that people won't be living like this for long.
القهر مع التردي الاقتصادي وسوء الخدمات.
The oppression, the bad economic environment, the bad public services, and the unemployment. Nobody in the regime was hearing the people suffering and their needs.
لأنين الشعب ومطالب الشعب.
People have been stressed out over the corruption, the lack of opportunities for the young people, the injustice, the secret police. I mean, like, there are so many reasons, even like going down the street and getting stuck in traffic because Mubarak is going, they have to empty the other street for him. This, everything made us really angry.
The regime was a gang of thieves based on abuse. I had no faith in it. The general reason for the revolution was the people's resentment at the terrible economic situation. We were facing corruption on a daily basis.
We are living in complete corrupt in all aspects of life, in everything. All the people were corrupt. Most of the people were corrupt. You used to pay extra money and unjustifiable money everywhere you go. It was a system of corruption. The thing that moved the revolution really is that the Egyptian people, first of all, the revolution was really made by middle class, high middle class Egyptian youth, Egyptian young generation, very intellectual, very well educated, and in a sense living comfortably. They have everything in life. They have the money, they have the power, they have everything. It's not the hungry people, it's not the suppressed people that went for revolution.
It's very difficult to just simply try to understand what happened in the Egyptian revolution by identifying one or two specific factors. It is in fact a situation which was extremely complex. and one where I think many factors played substantial roles. I think, for example, that the demonstrators who started in Tahrir Square on the 25th were ones who had very specific gripes. I don't think that they were principally interested or had in plan that this is about removing Mubarak from power. The situation in Egypt also was not necessarily sparked by something similar to what happened in Tunisia. And I think that the fact that many people joined what was called an uprising, it was not called a revolution at the time, in Tahrir Square was simply an indication of that power, the power of collective consciousness, the power that the people can in fact bring about change. I don't know if the people in Egypt knew exactly that that is where this uprising is going to lead, but many of them had hope that it would at least bring about some change.
واحنا عشنا أسوأ فترات حياتنا في العشر سنين الأخيرة.
We lived through the worst time in our lives in the last 10 years. The Egyptian economy was deteriorating fast in the last 10 years. The economy and the social life. We used to be a stable country and we became unstable. Because our economic system changed its direction from centralized economy to a privatized economy. Most of the Egyptian people weren't ready for this change.
والشعب المصري غالبيته ما كانش مستعد لكده.
I think the revolution was happening on many levels, political, economic. It wasn't only political corruption. The political corruption led to social corruption. There was a big class gap. The gap between the rich and the poor widened. The corruption was on many levels.
And every aspect in our life was deteriorating in the country. I mean, we're talking about education, schools, universities. I'm not talking about higher education. I'm talking basics. Healthcare. Our values being destroyed.
The price of everything is always on the rise, and there are no price controls. We buy an item today, and the following day the price for the same item is higher. There is no protection for the consumers. We can't continue living like this. We just can't.
The most powerful forces that I saw driving the revolution were corruption, poverty, ignorance, and the recent changes in world events. We were threatened that the Nile wouldn't be able to go on providing enough water for us, and the president was planning on passing his power along to his son.
It is important to recognize that the deteriorating economy, the fact that people graduate from universities and couldn't necessarily find jobs, have certainly been among the impetus why people who started to join the uprising in Tahrir Square felt the need to protest even further. But I'm not really sure that the economy in and of itself was the principal reason why people wanted Mubarak out or wanted change. I think if there was a single and most important reason, it is the feeling that they have never been able to control their own fate. This is once in their life where they had the opportunity to control their own fate, and that's what they did.
The police were widely hated in Egypt because their mission changed from serving and protecting the people to serving and protecting the president. So the police would suppress any opposition to the president immediately. At the same time, the police were well aware of their power in Egypt. They had unlimited power. Corruption and bribery were widespread among policemen. Police brutality was overwhelming. They tortured people at police stations, and they detained anybody in accordance with the emergency law that we have had for 30 years. The police could arrest anybody in the street and torture them. The people here were well aware of how the police behaved and what they were capable of. Therefore, fear of the police was common. The people didn't know how to express that fear. So when the revolution was going on, the people set most of the police stations on fire to take revenge on the police.
We lost our dignity, we lost our respect to ourselves. We lost love for each other. And I'm not talking only about different Christians and Muslims or Sunni and Shia. I'm not talking about this. Muslims, Sunni and Sunni, Christians and Christian, we reach a point that we are suspicious about everything, we're suspicious about everyone. We hate the style we're living, we hate the country. We hate ourselves, we hate Egyptians. We hate the way people are looking at us.
Tunisia had Bouazizi. Bouazizi burnt himself because of the tremendous humiliation that he encountered from the police, from the Tunisian police. Someone who had graduated from a university is trying to sell some things on the street, is not being allowed to do so because he doesn't have a permit. Isn't it enough that he has these degrees and yet he can't even survive in his own country selling things on the street? And, of course, this situation is so familiar to Egyptians. But I'm not really sure that Egyptians went out in the street to demonstrate such a situation. And I say that because it is so common that it happened to hundreds and thousands of people. Maybe they did not burn themselves in a square, but they have already been so accustomed to that. Seeing that the Tunisians have managed to remove Ben Ali must have influenced the Egyptians in some way or another.
We went to that stage that we cannot take it anymore. And the idea that his son is going to take over, I think also this put people like more frustrated. And I mean, the reasons, there's so many reasons, you lose count, people have said because of Khalid Said who died in Alexandria because of police brutality. People have said because of the parliamentary elections fraud. People have said. So I think, every single one of us has a reason to go out in the street and say, no, we don't want this anymore.
When we went out on the 25th of January, we never had in mind to drop Mubarak away, to let Mubarak go. We're just asking about democracy, although not all people know what democracy really means, but we are asking for democracy. We believed in democracy, even if we don't understand really, because we never practiced it. And by not practicing, you never learn about the thing. So we never practiced democracy, but we believe it's a right way to move in. We ask for human rights. We ask for equality. We never had in mind to drop Mubarak the first days of the revolution.
If these scenes are any indication, anger is at boiling point in Egypt, a populace known for its apathy, making history on Tuesday. Thousands marching against poverty and a government they hold responsible. The message loud and clear.
Enough is enough.
Our first slogan on the 25th of January, that was Tuesday, was عيش حرية كرامة إنسانية. That was our first slogan that gathered like hundreds of thousands of people all over Egypt. The revolution didn't start only in Cairo or in Alexandria, it was all over.
On January 25th, we started our protest in Baltim. The people's reaction was positive. We followed the news from other cities. On the second day, on our way to Baltim City, we were captured and detained for 2 days. Then we were released on the Friday of Anger. I spent the Friday of Anger in Kafr el-Sheikh. That was the day when the security forces pulled out. Because of that, we had to create the neighborhood watch to guard our homes, streets, and people. Despite the scenario the regime wanted to create, which was spreading fear and panic among people to stop the revolution.
You have to know that in Egypt, being scared is very acceptable and it's normal. And I was scared, I have to admit, I was not very brave. And I really wanted to go with a bunch of people, sort of protection. So if anything happens, at least they would know that I've been arrested or so.
They started by a small page on Facebook, asking people to go in a silent demonstration, which is mainly dressed in black, going to El Tahrir by the Corniche, the Nile River. You just stand over there, dressed in black, don't talk to anybody, don't say anything. As a way of protest, just standing in silence. The police didn't like this idea. They started to push people away from Tahrir, although they are just standing, doing nothing. I think this triggered something in the people. They started to think, okay, there's something wrong in our country and we should start moving. And these young people, they are doing something great. Little by little, many people started to join those young revolution people, starting to rebellions.
How I knew about it, it was from Twitter. I had an account of Twitter for 2 or 3 years now, I don't know, for long, but I never used it. And it was just on the Tuesday, 25th of January, that I started using it and following up on what's happening down in Tahrir.
As you probably know, a lot of people call this the Facebook revolution. I categorically disagree with that specific name, and I actually said so in my New York Times piece, mainly because I don't think that revolution ever happened in cyberspace, even if they start there. They need physical space, they need public space. Tahrir Square provided that. It's a square which was always called Liberation Square, if you will, but what liberation? In a sense, it was given a name by Gamal Abdel Nasser, a name that it may not actually have fully deserved, and a name that did not stick so much as meaningful for most Egyptians. Yes, a name that everybody actually used to call Tahrir Square, but Tahrir from what? Oh, it's Tahrir from the British. Well, technically the British left in 1922 and then left again in 1955 and 56. But in reality, Tahrir Square did not earn its name until the revolution that happened in the 18 days between January the 25th and February the 11th.
Was by the end of the day, by 25th of January, الشعب يريد إسقاط النظام. That was the slogan, and another slogan was سلمية سلمية, peaceful. We were here in peace, and we are not damaging anything. We are here just to claim our rights for dignity, freedom, and a good living in our country. This is our country, and we want it back.
The day Egyptians lost their fear. Friday the 28th of January, a battle that would last for hours fought along Cairo's Qasr al-Nil bridge. These pictures, shot from the eastern side of the river, show protesters trying to cross from the upscale neighborhood of Zamalek on the far side. Downtown Cairo and Tahrir Square, epicenter of the protests, awaits them on the near side, along with the brute force of the country's hated state police. Sirens wail and the crackle of tear gas canisters heard, but the people remain undeterred, some even catching the canisters in mid-flight and throwing them into the Nile. At one point, a column of protesters observed the call to prayer, even as water cannons sprayed just meters away from them. The police trucks make a retreat, while the crowd continues to swell, chanting slogans and defying the riot police again and again.
It was an expected reaction from an old, dilapidated regime, stupid, authoritarian, and routine, seeking stability without knowing how to play politics. Their idea about us was that we were just some kids. We can read a few words, but we won't do anything.
Suez was where it all started to become a revolution, because at this stage they shot people down. 3 people were killed in Suez the first day, and then this was it. The legitimacy of this regime is cracked when you start just to shoot your own people.
And Shafi, he's the prime minister. He was out of touch with reality. It seems like they were all, like the regime itself, they haven't been in contact with what's happening in the street at all. So they were talking and they were making concessions, and they think, wow, we've done enough. And they're not aware of how educated the people were, and how, like, these people know like what they want, and they know how to get it. And there was a joke about twittering and explaining that what is Twitter to an 80-year-old president. Okay, for example, that's why, like, how out of touch they were, and that's why all the speeches he gave, he was not making concessions. He was making things like, he was not even listening to his own people. He did not know his people.
On a crucial night for Egyptian politics, President Hosni Mubarak has refused to step down immediately from power, but instead promised not to stand again in September's elections. Responding to the growing chorus of demands for him to go, he addressed the nation.
There was a lot of factors that pushed in the way of dropping Mubarak. He was one of these factors. He didn't recognize our needs, he didn't listen to our needs, and he thought that it was something like happened before a lot of protests, a lot of he didn't realize it was different that time. And he made it insist, he made us persist on him stepping down. His arrogant talk, we were asking for things for the country, for the benefit of the country, and what he gave us is some nice talk about his history and what he did to the country, and we couldn't believe actually that he was talking that language these days. We couldn't realize, is this guy that stupid? Doesn't he really understand? Doesn't he really realize? Are the people around him preventing the real view, the real picture?
What did you make of President Mubarak's speech?
Katie, I think it's a last-ditch effort to stay in power. Despite the writing on the wall, despite every Egyptian made it loud and clear that he needs to go. That he lost the credibility, he lost confidence, he lost legitimacy.
I remember something on that day too. I found policemen, civilian clothes. They would go among the bunch of protesters and pick 2 or 3 people, take them to a side street where there is a police truck or something, and they would beat them. They would, I saw that with my own eyes. They would beat them, they would, sort of terrorizing them not to be part of this, and then they would release them.
Protests never stopped. We were out there on the 25th, 26th and 27th, but on the 28th, that was the big day. Maybe millions of people were right there, and they were determined to go after Friday prayers from all mosques and churches of Egypt, just to say no to Mubarak.
After several days of protest, the people knew that Friday, the Muslim day of prayer, would be their chance to take to the streets en masse. Tens of thousands turned out in the capital, Cairo, signalling the biggest demonstration in a generation.
But this time, on the Friday of anger, Egyptian people from all walks of life took to the street. I was walking in the demonstration. Next to me, an older man, middle-aged, young men, and children. I saw 7-year-old kids carrying the Egyptian flag along with educated women, upper, middle, and lower classes.
سواء المتعلمات أو الطبقة الراقية أو الطبقة المتوسطة أو اللي هي الطبقة.
Everyone was marching there together in a peaceful demonstration.
وماشيين في مظاهرة سلمية.
I moved back to Egypt for 4 months, and I took part in some street protests there. And the largest number we could get in Tahrir Square, in Liberation Square, was maybe 3,000, and that was it. And people would look at these tiny demonstrations and they would laugh. So the idea that thousands upon thousands of people could go out there in the street and stand up to Mubarak and his brutal security forces, no one could ever have imagined that this would happen.
I just remember a quote now that on the 25th of January, it was the first time that we had more protesters than police. Okay, so you can imagine the sort of protest that happened before that. We had more police than actual protesters. I remember I was downtown the first time they've done the 6th of April movement. At the time, I heard about it on Facebook, but I didn't expect. I was going to downtown AEC campus, and I came out of the underground, and they were circling. Police was circling the Tahrir Square, all of it. It was like shoulder to shoulder kind of thing, and with their big shields, and they were around. And all I can see is a bunch of people in the middle. Not many, and at the time I remember most of the people did not go down to the work because they were afraid there was something big going to happen, and it just passed.
No one would ever dare about talking about Mubarak leaving the regime. We might have been talking about Gamal, Mubarak not taking over, yeah, but nobody ever discussed the idea of Mubarak going away.
No way of communication between people, no mobiles, and maybe that was good, because instead of just being okay, I'm worried about you, and then I start to call you, and where did I? You just go on and do your mission. Maybe that was good. I mean, they helped us really that day.
Basically, all we can see is a lot of, like when downtown turned foggy because of the tear gas. This is how it was, and people were in the in the big buildings. People were in the balconies watching what's happening. We can hear sounds. We can hear we can see like an over extra foggy street or something like that. So we didn't know what to do. We wanted to join the protesters, but we couldn't find them.
People were out there. People even who didn't attend this, they were helping us on the street. My friends who were at different spots of Cairo and all over Egypt, they just keep telling you whatever is happening, and it's great. People say I was on this war zone, and they call it war zones. I mean, it's a district and then it's called a war zone.
People are there they're decent, they're just peaceful, they're trying very hard not to make anybody go wild and try to break things and get violent, and you should come and participate. It only turned out a bit violent at the end of the day when they wanted to make sure everyone goes home. I think it was at night, 11 o'clock, when the police started using, big fire, trucks, and using water to disperse the crowd, and then I think rubber bullets and tear gas.
We were able to get into Tahrir Square, and we got Tahrir Square for us. We are there, and we want to be there till the next morning, Wednesday. On that day, I was there too by night, and then after midnight, they started to shoot us again with huge amounts of tear gas, and we were evacuated by force from the square. We didn't go back home. We just kept marching from a street to another, shouting, الشعب يريد إسقاط النظام, down with this regime.
الطلبات كانت ان اولا اسقاط النظام الحاكم بما فيهم رأس النظام اللي هو حسني مبارك والمجموعة.
The demands were removing the current regime, including the head of the regime, Hosni Mubarak, and his cabinet, changing the constitution completely, and making a new one that limits the power of future presidents, and putting on trial all the corrupt people from Mubarak's time who were the reason for creating the current economic problems.
People want freedom and dignity from a dictatorship that has strangled Egypt for the past 30 years. This is a historic moment. I urge you to use the word revolt and uprising and revolution, and not chaos and not unrest.
People started, okay, we are there and we want our freedom, and down with Mubarak. He never realized our message. His second speech was really a shock to us, because he was using this emotional aspect of the Egyptian people, where he said, okay, I'm old, I want to die in Egypt. What does this have to do with our protests? We never told you go and die elsewhere. People started to say, what are we gonna do? People are saying, okay, just leave him for this 6 months. No, there's no turning back. You killed us. You shot us. You came with your F-16 planes and over Egypt, and just to make us panic. Actually, we didn't, but why would you shoot? Would you do that?
This is how it was organized. They were asking people who were from the big major mosques to finish the prayer and then start walking to Tahrir. And I was there around 2 p.m. and we couldn't find the crowd. All we could find is a lot of police, blocking all the streets downtown Cairo. They were like a fence sort of.
The protesters were telling women to stand back. Men were going in front. People were just running in front to fight against the thugs and whoever was there. And we saw no military intervention. I mean, it was obvious that the military didn't care. They were just standing there, and they were going back and forth. My cousin was trying to tell some people to not fight, to come back or whatever, and people were just going and kept on going. And we actually moved to an island in the middle of Tahrir and stood there. And we then started to see people coming out of the attack, being carried by fellow protesters out of the attack that had blood running down their face. I've never seen it. It looked like something out of what you'd see in Gaza.
But suddenly we heard a lot of horses and camels, riding and with the speed, and we didn't imagine. We didn't understand. Even when they penetrated the protesters, we didn't understand what they want. Are they coming to hit? And then suddenly we found it's not only camels and horses, it was a complete blockout. There were, what do they call, snipers all over the surrounding buildings, shooting at people randomly. A lot of people died. 13 people died from snipers only. Put aside the horses and the camels and so on.
I didn't see the camels, but I saw I saw two horses run past me. I had no idea why they were there, but I knew that this was different. I didn't see horses being brought down by the people, but they just ran through. We had no idea what was going on. I mean, it just seemed like total chaos. We ended up leaving shocked of what's going on and going home then and seeing the actual, the actual almost cavalry ride into Tahrir by the camels and horses was just amazing, because it looks like nothing when you're down in the crowd. It's just, running through the people. But seeing it from above was just amazing. The reason why that whole crowd moved back and we were pushed back towards Mogama was because of maybe 20 or so horses, or 30, I forget how many.
This revolution started on Facebook, Twitter. You use internet, you use mobiles, you use 21st century technology, and you come to defeat this by camels and horses. Pathetic, really, yeah. And that day was, one of the most glorious days of Egypt.
It felt surreal, but it also showed, in those days, it showed that the people were not going to just give up, because they went back to the front lines. They kept fighting into the night, kept pushing. Even though they were being forced into side streets and being attacked, they kept fighting down there. They weren't going to lose their position.
The Egyptian government has denied any involvement in these kind of attacks by mobs on peaceful demonstrators and reporters. They say they have no idea how these things happen. But the Egyptian military stood there and let it happen. I saw that with my own eyes. We all saw that.
We saw some people who were wounded 5 or 6 times, but they kept going back. We were attacked from all directions, from Talat Harb and Mohammed Mahmoud, the American University, from Qasr al-Aini. We were surrounded from all directions. Every time we captured one of the thugs, he would tell us that he thought we were Americans or were plotting with Americans. They were told that, or Israeli and such. When we gave them medical attention, they would be shocked and start crying. We kept telling them that we are Egyptian, just like them.
A man pleads for his life in downtown Cairo. Captured by anti-Mubarak protesters, he confesses he was paid 50 Egyptian pounds, less than $10, to attack them. This battle raging in Tahrir Square pits anti- and pro-Mubarak supporters against each other in a deadly struggle.
The government and the regime used all the possible tools to stop the revolution. Violence, aggression, rumors.
We've been accused of being traitors, we've been accused of being with foreign agenda. We've been trained in Israel. We've been trained by Iranians. We've been trained by Mossad. I mean, all sorts of crazy things you can imagine. And it was interesting how the information, like, they would say we've been trained by Iranians and Israel, and they're both very anti, each other. And then you go and the U.S. and it was pathetic.
So they tried to kill the revolution, different tools, dirty tools, but we are very persistent, and we knew, and we can see it very vivid, that this regime is done.
This is when we knew that Mubarak is not going to do what he said. Like I remember he promised that he will step down in September and he's not going to run again for presidency. He said that he is going to take care of, doing reforms, blah blah blah, change the constitution. And then on that same night, he went and he produced the thugs, and it didn't work. And then also when the police left, I don't know if you're aware of that, but the police, they all left at the same time, and they allowed prisoners outside in the street. It was a sense of stability, okay, versus stability without freedom, versus freedom and instability, and like chaos and all that. So it didn't work.
Beneath a flyover in Nasser city, a group of young Egyptians are blocking the road. It's a sign of the lawlessness sweeping Cairo. The men are armed with sticks, knives, anything they can find. They say they're here to protect their homes, because if they don't, no one else will.
We are trying to protect our families, our people, because we heard that there are many criminals, they are killing people and they are taking everything. So we are trying to protect our people.
The organization of all of these committees was just superb. The way that you turn your flashers on for some neighborhoods, the way you ask to put up your windshield wiper in other neighborhoods to signal that you've already gone through one checkpoint and you're okay, so you can just go through the rest, was just remarkable how they had this type of system to make sure that everything was running smoothly and the neighborhoods were protected.
The people used to stand on the street corners. We were carrying weapons to assist the army in the areas where the army was not present. We were protecting ourselves by ourselves. We were worried because we believed that there were people cruising around in cars and opening fire, mostly to make us panic, but it was all just rumors and lies to scare us.
We gather every day at 7:30 p.m. and we say, okay, who would like to do the first shift and who would like to do the second, and so on. Some people are armed,
Mohammed and his neighbors take turns protecting their property. By day, they're professionals. By night, street guards.
Groups of armed gangs are on the prowl, and ordinary citizens have to rely on themselves for protection. They've collected what they can: kitchen knives, bathroom brooms, sticks, poles, rods, anything they can get their hands on to keep their homes safe.
Habib al-Adl and the regime issued orders to the police to pull out of the cities to show how important the police are. Therefore, we were in the street all day and night as guards, carrying sticks and clubs. They also released the prisoners from the prisons with weapons. So you're not just facing someone with a knife. The prisoners had automatic weapons. They meant to humiliate us and get us to appreciate the police and spread the panic and fear.
If we had a leader, if this revolution had a leader, khalas, it would have done. This leader is now on top of the country, and we don't have a leader, we didn't have a leader. It was very spontaneous, it was out of the people. One day, there were 20 to 25 million Egyptians on the street asking Mubarak to leave. Very peacefully, very politely, asking Mubarak to leave.
At the beginning, I think they were looking for reforms only. But then, with how the regime dealt with the issue, they sort of, the demands have changed. They have become more specific. They've become politically more correct. So I think they were, the protesters, all of us were growing, you know, like politically right, and we're learning. I think it was a learning process. That's why by the last week, or last week we had 7 main demands, and they were portrayed on big buildings, you know, like a big flyer, I don't know what you call it, and they had the 7 demands, and they were specific, but it took them a while to, you know, sort of formulate such demands. And I think because all of them, they have no political background, but then eventually they were growing up.
That whole, you know, experience after the Battle of Camel showed to the government that the people weren't just going to leave, you know, that we were going to stay there, and that the people who couldn't go there were also going to be in support with them, because they had seen, you know, the crap that the government was going to do, and that they weren't going to take it anymore.
It's a matter of life and death, either to live in pride and dignity, or we just die in pride and dignity. So what could stop us next? Nothing.
We are all Egyptians. We didn't have that Christian-Muslim thing. And in Midat Tahrir it was very, very vivid. Friday and Sundays. You know, as Muslims, we have our main weekly prayers on Friday. And especially the first 2 or 3 weeks when we used to get hit daily by the police and the government. We used to pray in defense of Christians. On our Friday prayers, we used to pray, and the Christians are holding hands in a circle around us, protecting us. And we used to do the same thing on Sunday. They had their prayers, and as Muslims, we used to have to hold hands, it's a circle around us to protect them. Anyway. So Tahrir was really Egypt. It represented what the Egyptians want the country to be.
After the Battle of the Camel, and you went back down to Tahrir, and it felt like a picnic. It felt like a carnival, a family experience. I mean, those who went were just surprised by the change, because you had for 4 days or 3.5 days people fighting back and forth without the army interfering. Army only moving in or out to clear Molotov cocktails off their tank, or for their own logistics or such. So it was amazing to see the change.
All that we were doing was chanting anti-Mubarak slogans, but the atmosphere in Tahrir was beautiful, a community different than your own. We were living in a square full of freedom. Everyone there was united by one message. We were all against Mubarak's regime. We all agreed that corruption in the country as a whole had increased, and we had to change it. We had to start a new Egypt. There was an overwhelming sense of patriotism and cooperation.
Secretary, on Tuesday, after the protests had already started in Cairo, you said this.
Our assessment is that the Egyptian government is stable.
Hillary Clinton first time came and talked and said the Egyptian government is stable. We understood they've been sponsoring that kind of regime to make sure everything goes like the way they wanted.
You know, I think that the United States was extremely confused in terms of what was going on in Egypt. If you recall, at the first days, they kept basically saying, oh, but the regime is really stable, the Mubarak regime will survive. And they didn't really change their tune until about the 27th and the 28th, when they realized, one, that protesters are not going to go away, two, that the Mubarak regime is not as stable as they thought. The United States had invested quite a lot of money in Egypt as part of the peace treaty with Israel. They had also invested quite a lot of money in the Egyptian military. They had invested quite a lot of money in the idea of creating peace and having a partner in peace. And suddenly they found themselves in a situation where all of that is being threatened. So initially they were absolutely willing to support Mubarak until they realized that it's not to their best interest to support Mubarak. And I think that moment came very specifically when it became very, very clear that not only that the Mubarak regime was not going to survive, but when the Mubarak regime and the Mubarak thugs of the National Democratic Party went out and attacked the protesters in Tahrir Square, that's when you absolutely saw very clearly the United States making a shift in position, insisting that the demonstrators cannot be attacked this way, and finally accepting the fact that Mubarak has to go. Even though Mubarak was their ally for 30 years, I'm sure it must have been very difficult for them to see him go.
I didn't want the US or any European country to interfere in our matter here in Egypt. When it comes to the revolution, I wanted to be an Egyptian, a pure Egyptian revolution.
We had a lot to do with Mubarak being in power and staying in power. Like, we subsidize him, we own him. He's our puppet dictator. He does what we tell him because he gets so much money. He's gotten probably 60 to 70 billion dollars, and I understand his family probably has 60 or 70 billion dollars stashed away in Swiss accounts and other places around the world.
When the revolution happened, we realized it surprised everybody. Even Obama himself was surprised. He didn't know how to react. He couldn't assess the situation. He preached peace and democracy, but he knew that Mubarak's regime was an authoritarian, repressive regime. Despite that, he let us down. Clinton showed up on TV and said that the Egyptian regime is a stable regime. How is it stable? It's based on an oppressive security system, and you know it. I was very disappointed in all of them.
We really wanted solidarity from the public opinion all over the world, not just the West, not just the US, but we wanted people, the public opinion. We don't want anything from governments, because actually these governments were the ones who really helped Mubarak to stay for 30 years. We didn't expect anything from them, we didn't want anything from them.
The word to describe the leadership of Mubarak in Egypt and also in Tunisia before was dictator. Should Mubarak be seen as a dictator?
Look, Mubarak has been an ally of ours in a number of things that he's been very responsible on relative to geopolitical interest in the region, the Middle East peace efforts, the actions Egypt has taken relative to normalizing relationship with Israel, and I think that it would be, I would not refer to him as a dictator.
The only help we needed from USA or any other country is not to support the regime. Enough supporting corrupt regimes in the area. Not only in Egypt, but all over the Middle East. Unfortunately, the USA interest in the region is to support these regimes.
I think the international community did not really know what to do. I think they really wanted Egypt to be very stable, and that's for obvious reason because of Israel and such. It was very convenient for Israel to actually have dictators, to make deals with dictators, and not to worry about the larger sentiment or the bigger sentiment of the Arab people in any of these countries. So it was more secure for Israel to have Hosni Mubarak, or even, I would even argue, to have Bashar al-Assad, because at least they know who they are dealing with. Democracy is messy, and to bring all of these people into the equation, to expect that all of these opinions will in fact be taken into account, would possibly result in either no deal with Israel or a very different kind of deal with Israel. And that's why you see that the first things that started to happen is all of the deals that were made during the Mubarak time, which actually have their origin during Sadat's time as well, are being revised. Like, why is Egypt selling natural gas to Israel for a price that cannot be sustained? Why is Egypt subsidizing the Israeli economy? Why? Well, it is because that was part of the peace deal. That was almost a requirement for Egypt to do so. Well, not anymore, because the people who made the peace deal are gone. So in a sense, Israel, of course, is rightfully worried. I do not believe, however, that the change that is likely to happen in Egypt will end the peace treaty. What it will do is it will make the peace that had existed between Egypt and Israel, which has existed for a good 30 years now, as a cold peace. It will just simply make it more colder, if you will, frozen peace. But I don't think that it would result in a war. I don't believe that there are segments of the Egyptian population who are so interested in engaging in war, not even the Muslim Brotherhood.
And today, President Obama, for the first time, said out loud, almost, that it was time for Mubarak to step aside.
Now, I believe that President Mubarak cares about his country. He is proud, but he's also a patriot. The key question he should be asking himself is, how do I leave a legacy behind in which Egypt is able to get through this transformative period And my hope is that he will end up making the right decision.
We love America. We love the country. We love the people. We love the American civilization, the American culture. But we hate. We really hate and don't respect and don't appreciate the American policies in the Middle East.
Mubarak was a very good support of the states and their policy in the Middle East, and so if they lost Mubarak, they would lose their at least a very good ally here in Egypt. And so I think the government in the States, or Obama, he was a little bit worried about what would happen if Mubarak stepped down. So their comment in the beginning about the revolution was a little bit conservative one. They didn't give a direct opinion. They kept saying we support democracy in Egypt, we argue, and then little by little they kept saying we argue the president to make some to listen to the revolution and make some changes. They didn't listen to what the revolution wanted from the beginning, which is stepping down of the regime, the whole regime. But the states kept saying the president should make some changes in the government, and I didn't like this. At the end, as you saw, like Mubarak stepped down, and then the states, they said, oh, we support the revolution and what happened in Egypt is a very good thing.
Same old talking. I remember the Americans saying long time ago that they support democracy in our countries and they wish us all the best. I don't want to say they were liars, but they weren't really true about it. Because they discovered in Palestine that democracy could be harmful for them. Real democracy in the region could be harmful for them. Democracy in Palestine, they got Hamas to power.
We hate any interference in the internal affairs of the Arab region from any country. America intervened in Libya to protect the civilians. That was their reason. Why wouldn't they intervene to protect the Palestinians? The Palestinian people get killed day and night by the Israeli army. Why don't they intervene there? And in Somalia, they didn't intervene either. We don't want any country to intervene in our affairs.
They should have supported us. We don't want them to support us, but as a moral stance, they should have really. I mean, it's all a matter of interests. The ball. Where is the ball turning? It's turning towards the people. Okay, we are with the people. If it's with Mubarak, I don't think they would mind if he even killed us all, and that's really a shameful stance. Maybe people in these countries, they should start evaluating again their system and their governments.
American politicians, they should believe by now, they should recognize supporting the people is the real guarantee for their interests in the region. To support the people themselves, not the regimes. And to support the regime if the people chose the regime.
I believe that Suleiman must have in fact engineered the deal by which Mubarak left. Mubarak did not want to leave. On the 10th of February, he gave a defiant speech in which he said, I'm passing on some of my responsibilities to Suleiman and I am changing other things, so on and so forth, but I'm not resigning. I am not leaving the presidency. Exactly 12 hours later, it was Suleiman who came and said, Hosni Mubarak has decided that he's going to resign. I don't believe Hosni Mubarak resigned. I believe that what happened is Suleiman made a deal with Tantawi by which they will announce that Hosni Mubarak has already given up his position as president, despite the fact that Mubarak himself may not necessarily have wanted that. It may show you the power that Suleiman may have acquired. Suleiman gained quite a lot of power in the Egyptian administration under Mubarak, partly because of his involvement with the Americans, his involvement with the Israelis, the fact that he sat on the intelligence apparatus and ran it for many, many years. So this is a man who's actually extremely well connected. I don't think he was ever groomed to be president. He's old, he's of the ancien regime, if you will, and he's not necessarily someone who's charismatic. In fact, he appeared in a way where he was almost a bumbling individual when he appeared on the interview with Christian Amanpour to make the statement that the Egyptian people are not ready for democracy.
Do you believe in democracy?
For sure, everybody believes in the democracy.
So do you not?
But when you will do that? When the people here will have the culture of democracy.
February 10th, we had this third speech, which was really frustrating and depressing. He just said, I'm gonna stay, I'm gonna make Mr. Omar Suleiman do everything concerning all the jobs with the presidency and all, but I'm gonna still be your president. That was really frustrating for us, and we didn't just back down. People started to move towards Qasr al-Aruba, the palace, the presidential palace. People started to move towards, and that was really spontaneous. Nobody told people just go there, but they just wanted to say, you gotta get out. They moved on to TV and everything. The next day, that was February 11th, maybe by 6 o'clock or something, we got the speech.
Vice President Omar Suleiman appeared on Egyptian state television with the news the protesters had been waiting for. Hosni Mubarak was gone.
Oh my goodness, I did not believe it at the beginning, because it was Omar Suleiman who actually, and I said, and it took him only less than a minute to say the announcement, and I was like, you know, it was just, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. And I remember I just got back from Tahrir, and I was like, okay, I'm going again tomorrow. And I was like, oh my God, he left. Oh my God, he left. You know, it was such an unbelievable, especially after the, like, you know, like 24 hours he had given this pathetic speech where people were so angry at him. So it was, we did it. We did it. It was an amazing feeling.
I believe that the military forced him to do it so, because it was for the sake of the country, and definitely it was for the sake of the country. And the military, they know it. Although they might have given him or the regime a chance first days to regain their power or to fix the situation, the military gave them a chance to do so. They gave them way for the camels and the horses to go into Maidan Tahrir. It was the military on the street. But anyhow, at the end, it was the military who forced Mubarak to step down.
Let me tell you that any revolutionary in the world is a romantic and has high hopes and dreams. Whether or not they are realistic is not the point. They inspire you to work hard, and with some luck, you might get your dreams. We worked hard, and we were lucky to have a happy ending. Nobody believed it was possible, but it was our dream.
I can't really describe it, really. That was a real feeling, one hell of a feeling that, oh my God, the sticky person was out. Oh God. And then he's really, yeah, for 18 days.
What do you say in Arabic?
Laz'a. For 18 days, he was like, I'm here and I'm not. He didn't receive the message for 18 days.
I've never seen Egyptians as happy as they were the day Mubarak stepped down. We used to have a saying that we only gather for trivial things. The day Mubarak stepped down, at least 25-30 million people were happy on the street, happy for Mubarak being stepped down, and real happy. You can see it in their eyes, you can see it on their faces. You can judge if someone is really happy or pretending, or is it temporary or permanent. It was permanent. We felt that relief, and we didn't believe. Something no one would ever imagine that he will live to see that day. One of our dictatorship is stepping down. Although I don't believe, if you ask me, I don't believe that he stepped down. If you don't ask me, I won't tell you.
Do you believe that he stepped down?
No, I don't.